All right, thanks for staying with us. Just to get us into the conversation this morning, which is, of course, on the cabinet reshuffle, let's take this background report.
President Bola Tinubu returned to chair the Federal Executive Council meeting after his vacation abroad. With memos accumulated, it was expected to be a long session. But then, it ended to be one of the briefest FEC meetings so far. However, the outcomes of the meeting are not as short as the duration, with two separate briefing sessions afterwards. First, the ministerial briefing chaired by the Information and National Orientation Minister Mohammed Idris revealed the review of the ministries. While the hitherto Ministry of Sport Development has been scrapped for its responsibility to be taken by the National Sports Commission, the Ministry of Tourism is now subsumed under the Ministry of Arts, Culture and Creative Economy. The Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs now has a wider scope to cover other regional commissions and renamed Ministry of Regional Development.
Today, Mr. President and the FEC decided that all these commissions that have been created and signed by the National Assembly will be brought under the supervision of the SY Ministry of Niger Delta, which is now redesignated as the Ministry of Regional Development. For our people over there in the Niger Delta region, I would like them to know that that has not removed anything from them. The NDDC is still very much in place, which is still under the Ministry of Regional Development, and all other such agencies are there. It's just a question of change of nomenclature.
So it's an expansion. What the Federal Executive Council has seen is the need to bring this development closer to this to the people, closer to their regions. And so there's now an integration of the function of all these commissions under the supervision of the new Ministry of Regional Development.
Other decisions directly from the presidency were announced by the presidential media team. These include the discharge of 5 ministers, reassignments of 10, and nomination of 7 new ones for onward transmission to the National Assembly. The discharged ministers are Women Affairs, Uju Kennedy Ohaneye, Lola Adejon, former Minister of Tourism, Professor Tahir Mama, former Minister of Education, Abdullahi Mohammed Gwazo, former Minister of State, Housing and Urban Development, and Jamila Bio Ibrahim, former Minister of Youth Development.
The President met them this afternoon to thank them for their services for the nation.
The new nominees are Nentawe Yitwatsda, nominated for Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction, Mohammed Megeri Dingiadi, Labor and Employment, Bianca Odumegu Ojuku, Minister of State Foreign Affairs, Jumoke Oduole, Industry, Trade and Investment. Idi Mukhtar Meha is nominated to pioneer the newly established Ministry of Livestock Development. Yusuf Abdullahi Atta, Minister of State, Housing and Urban Development, and Suwaiba Saeed Ahmed, Minister of State, Education.
Honorable Dr. Yusuf Tanko Sunono, Minister of State, Education, as of now, is now the Minister of State, Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction. Dr. Morufu Olatunji Alausa, who is currently Minister of State for Health, is now the Minister of Education. Barrister Bello Mohammed Goronyo, who is Minister of State, Water, Resources and Sanitation, is now going to be Minister of State Works.
All right, that was background report by Musbarat Dan Wahab, State House correspondent, giving us, of course, lowdown of what transpired yesterday at the FEC meeting. And we have very important guests right here in the studio to give us more insight into the cabinet reshuffle. And I'll quickly begin with the introductions. And we have here Abdulaziz who is the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Print Media. And we're very glad that you could find time to join us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It's also a pleasure to have with us today Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Bayes University. Prof, it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure.
To have you with us, our own.
Thank you.
Victor.
All right, and we have also been joined here in the studio by Osita Okechukwu, former Director General, Voice of Nigeria, VON. A pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We have
One more.
One more. Okay.
Who's joined us via Zoom?
Oh, yes. Oh,
because
yes.
it's not visible
Yeah.
here. So we have also been joined by Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, a political scientist and public affairs analyst. Thank you for making it this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for coming and obliging us your time. I'd like to start with the Senior Special Assistant to the President because, of course, he's with the print media. And I'd like you to begin with some clarifications because we've seen, throughout last night, the print media, social media, have gone with different captions, ministers sacked, those days. But the presidency has come out to say, look, we have only reshuffled the cabinet. And because sack, connotes kind of negativity and abruptness of, end of a kind of, job and all that. Just give us, what is it really?
Thank you very much, Clara. And I think as a newsman, I will also start with a little story. So when I went home yesterday evening, my wife was asking if the ministers have been replaced who were sacked. And that tells you, the framing issue that you are talking about. And I think it comes from, thankfully we have a media scholar here. It comes from our own thought in the Nigerian media that always the bad news is the news. So, of course, some say the unusual. But, removing somebody is not unusual. But then to now concentrate solely on sack. So that was the story that a lot of people, as I, told you, even my wife was asking, when will the ministers be replaced? So it shows that people, a lot of the media, especially in online, concentrated on the issue of sack or frame it as sack. And that, they made that to be like the main issue. And
so they were not sacked.
Yes, I was saying last night somewhere else that I feel what happened actually is a rationalization of the entire cabinet. And I call it rationalization, which is actually not the word used in the statement, but it's because if you see what happened, like a lot of changes internally, even among the people who are there now. There were ministries who had ministers of state that were now removed because the feeling is that they don't need ministers of state. And then other ministries who had no such arrangement now have ministers of state. Now back to the issue of sack. So what happened is assessment to now retool the wheels of governance to find optimal use of people, its optimal use of human resource, which is only natural in any human resource setting, whether it be it in bank, in newsrooms, in schools. Effective managers, time to time, do this kind of stock taking. You find out that sometimes there are people that are so well mannered, you don't even, as a manager, you don't even let them go. But you have to, because you want to optimize performance in that area. So it's the same thing that happened in the sense that the president has personal relationship with nearly all of these people affected by these changes. So saying, please go, is not like a vote of no confidence. It's not like, it's not something that was done with malice or anything. But it was done in the interest of the country, in the interest of the administration, to see that, yes, this person is my friend. This person has come a long way with me. But now the president showed that his government or he as a person is willing to take tough decisions in the interest of the country. For example, there are some of the ministers removed yesterday were people that had been with the president from ACN, the Minister of Education, the Minister of State for Housing, I know. You know, the Minister of Women Affairs was aspirant in the APC who withdrew for the president on the day of the primary. So, you know, nearly all of them have this kind of personal relationship with the president. But for him, it is about how do we get the best for the country, especially at this time. We know that Nigerians are groaning, and we don't, the president doesn't want to take that for granted, and he's always thinking of how best to take the country out of the woods. And if it means, inconveniencing some friends to optimize that, why not? And that was what happened, actually.
All right. Even though I would have loved you along the line to have said, if you were still in the field, how you would couch yours to be different. Somebody, we were having a light-hearted conversation yesterday, and someone said, well, maybe I would say, excuse us, fake tells XYZ. You know, if that would sound better.
You know, one thing is, as I was saying, what happened was actually rationalization. And even if you take by the number, even had it been like he sacked 20 people, 20 people were removed, then that is something that is quite huge that we can say sack, because it shows that it was like a purge, you know. But this is 5, and 7 were appointed. So even if at that scale, you could see that the appointments outweigh even the removal. So, but why?
But was it based on the bond, you know, at the start of, you know, the administration, there was a signing of performance bond, and it was said that performance will be judged based on certain empirical data. You know, so was this what did you call it? There was a word you used.
No. Reorganization.
Reorganization.
Not actually reorganization. Rationalization.
Renationalization.
Rationalization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, this renationalization of the cabinet, was it based on the, you know, performance bond?
Yes, certainly. Certainly, you know, it's not because the president didn't like the face of XYZ. You understand? As I said, a number of them have actually a relationship with him prior to them becoming ministers or him becoming the president. So it was actually a product of that scientific analysis and assessment. As you said, when the president was swearing them in I think September last year, he made it clear that he is going to hold them accountable. He is going to assess them. And that assessment was not done just haphazardly. There were KPIs, you know, for every minister, and there were even a time when Nigerians were also asked for inputs. You know, the presidential delivery units actually asked for, asked Nigerians to vote to give their opinion on individual ministers. It happened some months ago. So this was like a product of both empirical and, you know, qualitative and quantitative data, as researchers like Professor Adeni would say. You know, so it's not just something that was because of the faces or names of the individuals. It
Okay,
was
but let's get into the meat of the issue. One area that seems to have already generated controversy was the scrapping of the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs. The elder statesman, Ike Clark, already reacted that, you know, this isn't good enough. Of course, while the Niger Delta Development Commission remains, the ministry dedicated to the development of the Niger Delta is no longer there. Would you say that in the thinking of Mr. President that, you know, the development of the region is still covered as much as it was with this new arrangement?
Well, let me approach it two ways. First is, let me say that I don't think the Niger Delta have had a friend in the villa as much as they have in President Bola Tinubu. He's somebody that is, in fact, by their own reckoning, is like one of their own. He's been very, very positive towards issues that affect the development of the Niger Delta, and even both in terms of appointments, in terms of tangible plans, and you can see that in also the reciprocal gesture from there, with improved security, with improvement in oil production, which and stability there, which shows you that the cordiality that exists between the present administration and the Niger Delta region. Now, secondly, we should also, and that's why I call the whole thing, the whole exercise, rationalization, because if you look at it, we should look at how to prioritize government spending. We have a lot of duplications, and a lot of times Nigerians come out to cry about high cost of governance, this and that. Meanwhile, you are having duplicitous agencies. You have Ministry of Niger Delta Development Commission, and at the end of it, they overlap. And in fact, in a number of places, I remember there was an inquiry, I think, at the National Assembly, where contracts were found to be awarded by the two entities for the same project, in some places. So, and even the issue of supervision, how does it even work? Even though the ministry is supposed to be ahead, but you find out that it's just one very inconvenient or cumbersome process. Now, with this arrangement, that NDDC remains. And in fact, even under the former arrangement, the bulk of the money goes to NDDC. It is NDDC that is largely, because I know at the end that is like what everybody looks at. The money that goes there is largely, NDDC, and it will still be there. And the ministry will still be there. It's just that, it's just like Shakespeare would say, what's in a name? So at the end, it's about the name. It's just bringing, as the minister explained in the clip earlier, it's actually expanded to bring in other development commissions, and therefore you cannot continue to call it Ministry of Niger Delta now. So because it encompasses Northeast Development Commission, Southwest, and others, and therefore had to be renamed into Ministry of Regional Development.
All right, thank you very much. We'll come back to that, and Victor was really in a hurry to delve into the nitty-gritty. But I'd like for Prof and the former DG to also weigh in on the merit of this exercise, the re-rationalization, according to Abdulaziz now. In terms of, if you look at the timing now, and then you look at the quality of the rationalization. Let's start with Prof.
Well, for me, I think usually some of these things can actually be indifferent to it, And this is because it's something that we actually expect. Every president, I think it was only President Buhari that didn't or change or rationalize or discharge any minister, all through
You're very cautious.
Yes, all through the period he was there, but previous ministers, are usually disposed to changing the machinery, the levers of government for different reasons, And one could be politics, the other could be performance. When it is politics, it's about satisfying interests that have not been satisfied before, or because they are pandering to the pressure tactics of other interests who are still feeling that they missed out, in an earlier constitution of the cabinet, And in some other cases, they are making projections for the next election, so they want to bring on board people who rather help them, in getting electoral advantage. That's the political aspect of it. And the political aspect of it is continuous, and it can happen anytime. And we also need to remember that ministers are there at the pleasure of the president. He can hire and can fire. And sometimes if a president is probably intemperate, otherwise any little thing, he can ask a minister to go. But again, now we're here, 17 months down the line, we're having a reshuffle. The other thing that can also lead to it is performance, But performance can also neither be here nor there. It's for the president to measure, to determine who is doing well and who is not doing well. Sometimes, again, it can come from public opinion, public perception, which could be right or wrong. And sometimes it can also come from the judgment of the president, that this has happened or this has not happened, or maybe from those around him thinking that this person made a mistake at the time, and so he should be punished with a replacement. Or perhaps they think that there's a powerful person somewhere who is probably more capable, so let's bring him in because we missed him the last time and it's not causing us trouble. Different reasons can also determine the performance question. So it is not unexpected that we're having it. And if you remember, some 2-3 months down the line, particularly after President Tinubu became 1 year in office, there were agitations and circles that let's have a cabinet reshuffle. And it has come to be like something that people enjoy. They just want to see that musical chair, sometimes imagining that, okay, this time around, there's nobody I know that is on board. Perhaps if there's another reshuffle, I'll probably know somebody or know somebody that knows somebody.
Yes.
Consistent with, our system where things hardly happen on merit. It's about who you know when you want to get things done.
But what do you think about the quality, just before we bring in the DG, the quality of the re-rationalization? I like to use this word because that should be authentic.
Yes, I was coming to there, final, and it's about who you know, not necessarily how things getting done on merit. But in terms of quality, again, it reminds us of the Hadiza Bala Osman body or the unit that is responsible for policy.
Bond, yes.
Well, it could be, maybe there was some input from there, but in some cases, looking at it, there are some people who have been discharged or who have been victim of the rationalization, according to Abdulaziz, who I don't believe, were discharged because of non-performance, because these were competent people who probably lost out because of some other reasons. But again...
like who?
No, maybe we shouldn't, but yeah, like the education minister, for instance. Okay. And I believe that a gentleman, very competent person, very experienced, and maybe again, he will probably have been overwhelmed by politics, And like you said, I agree again, is that for some of them, and particularly himself, if he's been asked to go, it's not because he didn't perform.
But was his performance relatable to what is happening in the education sector? Because you are saying that.
Oh yeah, in the education sector, we had some fits. ASU, for instance, is a very can be very agitative, and of course, for some time now, he's been able to manage ASU, preventing them from strike. He came up again, faced the question of IPPIS, and ensured that ASU was agitating for the removal of lecturers from IPPS. He did a lot in that regard. Then out of school children, he was doing a lot in that regard. Yes, there were 1 or 2 controversies.
And the new curriculum,
but it wasn't enough to vitiate or to diminish, his feats as a competent education minister, as the case could be. But finally, on the quality question that we are talking about, it is time that we actually tell all that, because most of the time when we see changes, it's a matter of musical chair. It's not largely because of individuals, it's largely because of the system. Our system is often overwhelming on the negative side. So if you bring an angel into some ministries, no matter, try as it may be, at the end of the day, you still say that they are not doing well. So it's the system that we should look at, most of the time rather than the individuals. Because in another 2-3 years, we'll still say, oh, let's have some changes because these people who are there are not performing. So it shouldn't just be a continuous sing-song. It should be about substance, not just the form of it.
DG, sir?
Former
DG, yes. I'm sorry, former DG. So just weigh in on this conversation as well. In terms of, like I said, let's look at the merits, in terms of timing and in terms of quality of what has happened.
But let us start by looking at the presidential system and what Mr. President set out to do from day one. He's considered the Hadija Balosman Committee and gave a clear mandate that there will be KPI, which is Key Performance Index. I think Mr. President had tried to exercise all the powers Section 5 of the 1999 Constitution conferred on him, that he is vested with the executive powers of the Federation, and that he exercises it or he delegates. And he had looked at the performance of some of them and yearned to some of the outcries on the street that there should be change. And even some people are agitating for more. So I think what Mr. President had done is to put the ministers on toes so that they would know that nobody there had come like in the last President Buhari's regime, where some ministers stayed for 8 years. Whether they performed, they did not perform. So Mr. President had accepted that the responsibility and the buck stops on his desk, and therefore the performance of anybody is dependent on himself. So I think he had done so well, and he needs to do more, because there are certain ministers who have no business being in his cabinet. There are certain touches that he needs to do. He did so well in the fact that he showed he's a listening president, that is listening to the streets. He had also placed some of the ministers in square pegs in square holes. When you look at Honorable Minister Imam Suleiman Ibrahim, who moved from Minister of State Police Affairs to Women Affairs, if you know her very well, she's a pro person. I think she's going to do well because she had been a person who had yearned for the upliftment of the gender in Nigeria. And going to the Ministry of Women Affairs, she's likely most going to do well. And remember as well that he created the Ministry of Livestock. I think it's a big kudos to Mr. President, because that a large section of farmers in the country are not going to farms is because of the headers farmers clashes. I think the minister, if he takes the bull by the horn, going by all the documents like the National Livestock Transformation Plan of the governors of since 2018, and the chairman of my party, Dr. Ganduje's plan as well, he will come to put a halt to the headers farmers clashes and get a lot of farmers, especially in the food basket zones, back to the farm. It doesn't cost anything for the country to do that, even if it involves borrowing. Most countries that were faced with similar challenges went into outright ranches that cost billions, but it paid off because it has security nexus, it has food security nexus. So when you consider that it goes on two planks of security and food security and fiscal security, I think it's what they make. Going back to my own region, for Mr. President to deem it wise to appoint Ambassador Bianca Ojukwu Ono, who had come a long way, came to the national limelight as a most beautiful girl, first of Nigeria, second of Africa, and intercontinental, and was an ambassador. It means that the minister is looking beyond is looking the other side, that there are a section of the country that felt that maybe they are not part of what he's doing. And what do I do? He looked at the pedigree of the late Ikemba Nnewi and said the wife can be a front runner in trying to let the people know that they're part of what he's doing.
So that's, in your opinion, that's for political reasons?
No, you mustn't go just with the performance reasons only. You must make a mix. Because if a section of the country feels they are not part of what you're doing, and you have a way to bring them in, somebody had asked himself, what of these commissions? Do you need to do Southeast Commission to know that you fix the roads?
We will come back to that. Let's just take...
Because I just wanted that clarification before I get
I'm
Dr.
saying that
Abdurrahman.
the inclusion he did by appointing Ambassador Bianca is very welcome.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Osita Okechukwu. Let me now get to Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, who is a political scientist. Doc, you've had the benefit of listening to everyone in the studio, and I just want to get your initial reaction to the developments at the Federal Executive Council yesterday. How the introduction of a new ministry, the switch from sports ministry back to National Sports Commission, and all the developments. What's your initial reaction to it?
Thank you very much. I want to say kudos to Mr. President and his team because the first principle of running every organization is the health of the organization. And you cannot measure the health of the organization if you cannot measure the performance of those that are occupying the organization. So, for instance, all the ministries are supposed to perform some roles that ought to assist Mr. President to achieve the set objectives he has pledged to deliver while he was campaigning and up to the point that he became the president. Now, it's only people that are not given to reviewing what they are doing and taking appropriate actions that will wait for the roofs of their house to fall on their heads. So, for instance, if you have a car and you drive your car without taking a listen to the engine and all the components, you run the risk of having your car parked by the roadside with a caution sign for others to navigate. But if you deploy what I would choose to call a studious disposition to whatever endeavor that you are going to do, then you become a very restless person doing different things at the same time. And that is exactly what the president has done. What the president and his team has done is to review a lot of things. For instance, did we put the round peg in the round holes? Do we need to realign? Do we need to restructure? Do we need to review? Do we need to realign? Do we need to reshuffle? Do we need to sack? I want to hammer on something. Sack is sack, whether it is positive or negative. If we don't have the capacity to name a thing and to convey a meaning of what it is, then we'll run the risk of recycling people that are not supposed to be in the corridors of power. When somebody is sacked, the person is sacked because the performance is not okay. That is the word. So to say we are rationalizing just to cover for some persons that we feel that did not perform very well, it's not doing the country favor. We're a country of 200 million plus people. So if it means the president will continue to sack every day until he gets the right people to deliver, so be it. So I don't want us to ennoble something that is not noble. I will not be part of it, and I will dissociate myself from it, and that is exactly what I'm doing. So if they perform, they will still be in the system. On that issue of performance, there are persons in Mr. President government that also need to go. If we are to judge by indices that we use to measure performance. So, for instance, you look at every sector, what is happening in those sectors. Are the sectors better off? Are Nigerians better off? Don't forget that not too long ago, Nigerians were protesting hunger. And when you analyze the factors that led to hunger, it has to do with insecurity, mainly that farmers cannot go to farm. And even if they go to farm, they cannot harvest. So what is happening to security? You talk about fuel scarcity, you talk about inflation. Now, these are constellation of factors. So if we really want to be honest with ourselves, then it means that there are a lot of persons that needed to go. But then what Mr. President has done is to say, look, we have the capacity to sack more. But for now, we are sacking just few, just to keep others on their toes, whether they are going to perform or not. The invention of sacking as punishment for non-performance is not because people are hated. It is meant to keep people on their toes, to show to others that what has happened to these persons can likely happen to you. You need to double your effort. Now, coming to issues around realignment. So, for instance, as Abdulaziz, my brother, said, you have duplications, and then that needed to be taken care of. Now, from just Niger Delta Development Commission, we have Northeast Development Commission, we now have Northwest Development Commission, then we have the Southeast Development Commission. Now, if all these commissions have come on board, who supervises them? And I think it is wise for Mr. President to have brought them under the former Niger Delta Commission. It shows that the president and those around him are thinking supervision is very key. And even the sacking is a way of showing supervision. that Mr. President is in charge, together with his team, Hadiza Bala Usman and others. They are working to review what others are doing, and we need to take action. And it is the basis of that, on the basis of that, that Mr. President has done some of this. So the realignment is very key. The conference that even produced the blueprint that went into what became the Minister of Livestock ministry today, I was part of it. It held in Abuja and about 3, and I was surprised at the level of resource that were gathered by Professor Jega and his team, his able team, and then they were able to aggregate those very particular persons and their thought into a national policy for livestock production. I think it is a problem solving for me, for the president to have listened attentively and accepted what was started by the current chairman of the APC, Dr. Ganduje, into a national framework that's supposed to guide livestock production and enhancing security within that sector of the economy. I think it's something that is commendable, because it started like a Kano State thing that was supported by Kano State government that is trying to find solution to the farmer-others conflict. Now, if the president can find something that was done or supported by Kano State to be beneficial to the nation and he accepted it, then it means it's a listening president. So for me, that is why I said from the very beginning, kudos to Mr. President. These are the kind of things that we would like to say, not because we hate some persons or because we are not in power. No, I don't care who governs this country. I don't care who is the Minister of Petroleum. All I want to know is each time I drive to the filling station, I should be able to fill my tank at affordable price. So this is the spirit that we want to see govern Nigeria, though you cannot divorce it from the fact that ultimately the president will want something that will deliver votes for him if he wants to go for second term. And the politicians have a way to do it. First is either as an appointee of Mr. President, you have followership that you are able to maintain up to today that you could turn for Mr. President, or that you use your office to deliver the things that Nigerians want that will endear them to Mr. President and what he is doing, and ultimately translate to victory in 2027. But if you are not doing this, you are not able to even maintain. When you became minister, you became aloof, you've left your constituency because you have DSS and everybody around you that is guiding you, so you no longer need people, and then you have platform to perform. You have platform to perform, and you are not performing. Then it means you have run a sack and you need to go on both accounts.
Dr. Hamisu, thank you. Let's quickly again start from you now before we come back to the studio to look at the substance of the action taken, the reshuffle or the removal and replacement, expansion, and all that. And again, I like to look at the Niger Delta ministry that has now been expanded to the regional development ministry, and some people have really expressed mixed reaction to that. You consider the enormity of what the Niger Delta ministry had to do and the complaints and agitations coming even from that region alone, meaning that that ministry had not effectively discharged its duties to the Niger Delta region. Now you're coming to expand and add these commissions. Isn't that an overkill? Isn't that an overload on that ministry alone?
Well, thank you very much. I think right from day one, when that ministry was created, I was even part of the people that kicked against it in the first instance, because the Niger Delta had a problem. And the problem is multifaceted that requires some level of development. Now, the Niger Delta Development Commission was there. You have the derivation principle that goes to that very particular region. You have the amnesty, and then you have Ministry of Niger Delta. And the reason why we kick against it, I want to be very patriotic and open about what I'm saying today, is because if we said, okay, because Niger Delta has a peculiar problem as a region, Niger Delta should be given a ministry, then it means that Northeast should be given a ministry, because the problem in the Northeast is even greater than the problem in the Niger Delta. It means that Southeast should be given its own ministry. It means that Northwest currently, because it have challenges, should be given its own ministry. This is the duplication we don't want to see. Now, if Niger Delta Development Commission is meant to solve the problem of development, you are in this studio when we analyze what was done in the Niger Delta. The report has it that about 40 billion US dollars has been spent in the Niger Delta and nothing to show for it. Added to the Niger Delta Ministry, added to amnesty. So if Mr. President feels that, look, we need to manage our resources based on the realities of our time today, that we cannot have overlapping and then duplicating agencies that are fighting over who does what. And let me be open with you. What has been happening in Nigeria is that when you have agencies that are overlapping, there will never be a time that they will come together to streamline their activities by way of organizing joint planning and joint execution. They will never do that. Every time they run to National Assembly, are seeking for a separate budget for themselves, and they will always ask for increment of budget. So that is frittering away our resources. So whatever resources that's supposed to be given to Niger Delta Ministry should be added to the Niger Delta Development Commission and Amnesty and other framework that have been evolved, so that this very particular ministry changes to ministry that supervises all of these commissions and align their developmental programs across the region and then with federal government of Nigeria. For me, this is the rational thing to do, and Mr. President has done it. Although people will kick against it because in Nigeria, people always ask for more resources to their region, but they don't want us to ask them how they are spending those resources.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Habisu. Let me get back here in the studio with Abdulaziz. Since we are now talking the Niger Delta, you've done some talk about it earlier, but there are also comments from some other sections. If you had, maybe because there is a peculiar situation in the Northeast, a commission was created, and then the Southeast says, oh, we've had this long-running issue. A commission was created. Now, every section of the country wants its own commission. The one you leave out will tell you that it's because you don't count them as part of it. So Southwest is getting. The South-South, I understand, is also on the way. So everybody's getting. The Niger Delta would say, ours is not for the southern people. It is for a region, the oil-producing areas, because it has Ondo State in it, it has Abia in it, it has some other states that are not south. And so if we continue, we're going to create all of this into the same ministry. What exactly is the task before the Ministry of Regional Development?
What will be the task?
Exactly. That should have been the question. But, honestly, I feel a country like Nigeria is evolutionary. All countries are, but especially like Nigeria, because of our peculiarities. And we just have to, and that's one issue when you have a multi-ethnic, multicultural federation. Look at the UK, for example. Up to today, how many years? But they are still grappling with issues. Scotland will say this tomorrow, and Wales will say that, and things like that. So what of Nigeria? So it's those agitations and contending interests are not something that you can overcome or wish away. It's just something that we just have to find a way of managing. And I like what Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Habisu said earlier about, putting the interest of the country first, not what comes to your origin. And even if you have things that go to your origin, ask how that is being spent. Because, for example, for all these years, one issue is that we have had a lot of, people advocate for true federalism, which of course a lot of experts will tell you what constitutes true federalism. But of course, if you limit it even to the issue of more powers to the to the federating units. At the end, you also come to ask, like, how are these powers being managed by these federating units? Whether it is financial power in terms of more money, or in terms of other powers, like, for example, those agitating for state police and all that. We need accountability. For me, that, I think, is the main issue. There is need for accountability. A lot of times, people point at the top, always point at the federal government. We fail to to ask. And I have been, like many years ago, I have always said, especially for my brothers from South, maybe the Niger Delta and Southeast, who, with all respect to them, a number of them, sometimes rightfully so, complain a lot about being excluded or about not benefiting from some things. And I ask, do you ask your leaders at subnationals, what do they do with their resources already been made available to them? You go to a number of these states and you see nothing. And of course, to an extent, it's a situation almost all over the country. So sometimes it's just like the saying that we are not lacking in laws, but it's the implementation. So it's the same thing. I don't think we are lacking in frameworks and resources to the subnationals, but it's the issue of accountability of how well are these resources been used. So if we continue, it's just like agitations for more states or things like that, you can be doing it till kingdom comes, and then there is no, it doesn't manifest in the quality of life that the people live. So that aside, politically or in terms of governance, as a government, I would say that for now, that is it, that this ministry will supervise. Supervision does not mean it is the one executing, because these are all like autonomous commissions. But of course, you need that kind of high-level coordination, even for example, for administrative purposes, for the purpose of coming to council, because the MDs of these regional commissions are not members of the Federal Executive Council. They may have policies or programs or projects that have to be approved at the level of Federal Executive Council, and therefore you need a minister that can now be the person to coordinate these things. So I think that is basically it.
I think I'll align my thoughts, with you. Maybe probably the task now will be basically supervisory, just to supervise, activities. And that's why even at the global level, where you do not have an overriding, regulator, of the international system. That's why you had the UN, just to act as, it's a watchdog. But again, Dr. Hamisu said something about the magnitude, or if you may, the volume of challenges afflicting the different regions. And I really do not think that it would be right to begin to compare, because they affect people differently and at different degrees. So the challenges facing one region, should not be comparable to the other region. So they affect the regions, the people, differently and in diverse ways. So I think I just wanted to clarify that. But let's again look at, we're still looking at the substance of, the rationalization. And I don't know what your views are about the expansion of the Ministry of Niger Delta. But let us also look at the merging of the ministries of arts, of tourism, arts and culture, with creative economy. Ab-initio, I was wondering why, that sector, was, was divided in the first place.
Well, very interesting. But first, I think it's also okay for us to, for me to maybe join the debate on the nomenclature, or how we want to describe, the activity, what happened yesterday at the villa, between SAC, rationalization, trimming down or juggling or shuffling, as the case could be. But again, I think that in the media, in the print media, where Abdulaziz, my friend, is an expert, there's something that could trickle, or could be that the editor could find very interesting. Sensation, something that is much more salacious, that will strike the audience or strike the reader, and of course make the material much more compelling for you to be engaged. So if we see it playing out from yesterday up to today, it's something that we should ordinarily be used to or accept, as the case could be. But of course, we want to go with the word that the president used, which is discharge. He said they have been discharge. But Abdulaziz has moderated it by describing it as rationalization, which is not also bad.
Out of place.
Which is not also out of place. But
It sweetens it.
yeah, again, yeah. But again, nation building is a continuous process. And that's why political scientists call it nation building. They call it nation building because it's a process. Like you're building a house, or just that this one deals largely with intangibles, you are being mindful of the psychologies of constituent units. You are being mindful of, the attitude, the disposition of constituents. You are integrating them at the level of development, at the level of representation and inclusion, making them feel that sense of belonging, consequent upon long years of longing. And everywhere else, we see it happening. Even in most sophisticated democracies, United States, United Kingdom, we still see deliberate efforts on the part of government, to be integrative, and rather than being exclusionary. So, again, we are trickling with things in this country, but my greatest concern is the way we tweak things. It's okay for us to tweak these ministries, departments, and agencies in the spirit of cutting costs, bringing them together, harmonizing, or maybe for administrative convenience and all of that. But if it is one too many, if it is happening too frequently, where there's no continuity, when there's no stability, when there's no continuity or sustainability, it can also lead to inefficiency and the absence of productivity. Or sometimes it can even worsen the big elephant in the room that we keep talking about, which is corruption, lack of transparency and accountability. Because if there's no system, no sustainability, today there's a change here, tomorrow there's another change, it can give room for people to manipulate processes and procedures. Over in the last 10 years, for instance, we have seen some of these ministries being merged, remerged, and merged again. We probably will appreciate the president for what he's doing if it's to bring about productivity and efficiency, but we have to also be mindful of the downside of it. We have to be watchful of the inadequacy that can result from it if there's no continuity, and sustainability, because that is only on that ground, through the institutionalization of the process, that we can see actual progress and development. But again, back to the specific question of the ministries we talk about. Yes, I agree, it's fine, as much as possible, if they can be integrated, because tourism, creative economy, if you look at them, whether the etymology or the morphology, whatever sense you want to look at it, they may not be too different. And again, what also matter is the human resources, or the persons, the individuals manning that ministry at the helm of affairs, the kind of dynamism, creativity, and ingenuity that they put into it. That will also matter at the end of the day, because if somebody does not have the requisite vision and mission, or the passion, to have the understanding around what the ministry is all about, then of course the person will probably be wandering in the wilderness, just trying to think that he or she should enjoy the perks and perquisites of office without necessarily delivering. So the leadership of the ministry or agency matters a lot.
What about the people? What about the workforce? Apart from the leadership, when you merge, this two big ministries. What about the workforce?
Yeah, that's why I talked about human resources. It's not just about the leadership, but the workforce is also inclusive. But the workforce relies on the leadership for direction. Okay, and if the leadership is rudderless, then of course there will be a confusion in the whole place. The people are often there to be led by the leader, and that's why in that case we have to rely. We have to trust that what the president did is correct by putting by emplacing the person he has emplaced. And we just hope that that person understands, the mission, the overarching mandate of the ministry, not necessarily particularly with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, but with every other ministry that have been integrated.
I'm actually referring to what will be, what might be the fate of the workforce, because if you imagine these two ministries, already they have full, staff complements.
Yes, that's right.
So now you are bringing them together. And the purpose of merging or separating is for efficiency and to reduce costs.
Again, at the end of the day, I'm sure that government is very slow to discharging people. That word again, or to saying they want to sack because there will be staff who are surplus to to requirement. I don't see that happening, but there's a danger of us having people who will be idle. Already, there are reasons for us to suspect that in some public service or civil service organizations, some members of staff are surplus to requirement. In the private sector, what 5 people will be doing in the private sector, in the public sector, you see 20 people doing it. So you're likely to see more of that with unbridled mergers, and acquisition in the public sector that is presently ongoing. But again, if there is increased creativity, maybe some kind of ingenuity in terms of, generating some new tasks for them, they could become much more productive and get people who ensure that people are adding value and, of course, earning the money that they are being paid, not just coming to work, sleeping and watching television, reading newspapers, and earning salary at the end of the day.
Okay, I think
all right.
we just take a break. When we come back, we'll tee up from the former DG. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Time for a break.
Thanks for staying with us. This is still Good Morning Nigeria, and we've been talking about the recent cabinet reshuffle. Now let me get to the former DG of Voice of Nigeria, Osita Okechukwu. We've been talking about effectiveness, with the rejig or realignment, whatever it is, but we've been talking about getting it more effective. And I make reference, maybe as a guide to the Sports Commission, where we've been before. Now we came to Ministry of Sports, we are back. So in effect, the name does not necessarily do the job because we have been there before. So is this likely a change of guard to make it more effective? And how do we get to that?
For me, I think Mr. President has done so well by instituting the Hadiza Balausman Policy Committee with the tools to measure the key performance index. Both in Harvard School and all the business schools of the world, the studies, do you have a key performance index to measure the performance of each individual on daily basis? So if Mr. President strengthens what Hadiza is doing, don't forget that Hadiza herself is the daughter of late Balausman, who had been an anti-corruption crusader. So if you go by that unit alone to become the ombudsman, it will get Mr. President to get what is needed, so that if he budgets 10 million naira in any department or agency or ministry, the unit will be in a position to say, Mr. President, it had been prudently used or not used. Because it's very easy to account for, under this Treasury bill, any money that leaves the Federal Treasury, if you are sincere about looking where the money went to, it's very easy. I'm one of those who have said, when we're having hitches in the Apapa Wharf, I said, why the hitch? When we have enough resources to develop the Port Harcourt Wharf or Calabar Wharf, or even the new one in Ibaka, do we need the Niger Delta to do so? Do we need the Niger Delta Commission to transform the Niger Delta? Sincerely, we do not. But because of the fact that we are affected by the contagion of state capture, everybody wants to capture a unit. Whereas Abdulaziz said, nobody will even ask what he's doing with it. Rather, his people will be praising him. Osita, they made you chairman of Southeast Commission. Thank God, we are coming around. They're not asking whether the logistics of maintaining that commission is enough to do 10 kilometers of an asphalted road. They're not thinking of the fact that from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, the Eastern Corridor rail line, collectively of the money used in that bureaucracy will match the Chinese road belt
and road
loan to have a standard gauge that will help to empower the people of that region, where the farmers who produce tomatoes in Maiduguri will seamlessly transport the tomatoes back to Port Harcourt, both for export, and where the petrol, the PMS, will easily be railroaded by rail. Not question of the Jigawa scenario where the tanker will explode on the road. It becomes seamless cheaply. So I think we should also, while Mr. President is trying to rationalize, as said here, or sack, that unit, the policy units, should be strengthened, more empowered, more capable, so that Mr. President will be, because he talks about the eagerness and his determination to lead Nigeria to an irreversible growth. For us to get to that irreversible growth, to conquer hunger, he has set up the livestock ministry. Are we going to fund it? Because there will be competing resource of trying to maintain these agencies and commissions. Meanwhile, the money used to administer those commissions will be missing in getting the problem solved. So I think we should use that Hadiza committee to focus on policy direction. Why is more people going into hunger into the country? Why are more people out of school? Why are more women dying of high mortality rates? Why are we on the downside? So it's not a question of who gets what. If you talk of the state capture, that this man is chairman of this, that man is director of that, we cannot get bogged down by that. As they say, the bureaucracy had always been there. If you rationalize any ministry, the permanent secretary knows what to do. The directors know their functions. Their functions have not changed. Even if you don't want to do a rationalization of staff as well, the point is, how well are you managing the prudent? If the KPI is a hammer, is a tool to that direction.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
Thank
that
you.
policy should be strengthened.
Thank you, Mr. Kichiku, thank you. Let's bring in Dr. Hamisu and begin to look at the change of guard, as Victor rightly puts it, and look at the personalities involved now. And if we can have that list on screen, I will really appreciate it, Director, so that we know those people. Suleiman, of course, moves from police affairs to women affairs now. Former now, Minister of Education, Professor Maman, has been taken off. Earlier on, Professor Adeni also making a case for him. We want to look at probably if there were, if there were, benchmarks, what would I say? Why these people were moved? If the removal, can be justified and all that. Professor Adeni had already said Professor Maman shouldn't have been removed. Can we have the list of those names, if we can have them? But let's begin with former Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Maman. Professor Hamis.
I can hear you. You say I want to disagree with Professor Adeni. That somebody is a perfect gentleman and is a disciplined person, and who is supposed to use his mind to bring about changes that are needed in society. And maybe the person is not equipped for the role he has been given. For instance, when you appoint somebody who is a lab scientist to Central Bank of Nigeria to manage our inflation, except if the person is willing to drop all that is used to do in the lab and wear the lens of a financial analyst and assembling people that are conversant with financial management to be able to get solutions. So in governance, it is the mind of the person that is occupying the seat. It doesn't matter whether the person read social sciences or any course from social sciences or law or art. The mind is so versatile that it can accomplish anything. But once the person is overwhelmed and the person is grappling with the task of understanding the environment within which he is working, the terminologies, the inner working laws, as well as relationships, and the person shows sign of not being able to be at the top of the whole thing, to aggregate and analyze and bring positive change, then that person is not prepared for that office. Probably the person may have done well in different areas. So, for instance, if Professor Tahir Mama is a perfect gentleman, is known with the law, is a scholar in the areas of our laws, both locally and internationally, and then he could do more at the Federal Ministry of Justice, and it's not giving Federal Ministry of Justice, and it's not ready to adapt to the challenges of the Ministry of Education, because that is not where he's equipped with, and he has not assembled enough persons that could give him direction, those that are conversant with the industry. It means that he will be able to discharge his functions as a Minister of Education, and it cut across so that governance is not about the person being an expert in that area. It is also about your ability to aggregate persons that are conversant with the sector or subsector, so that you can leverage on their capacity. And this is where the issue of think tanks usually come in. And the same thing I would say of Adizabala Usman's unit. That unit is doing some things, though I'm not conversant with it, apart from the fact that they are to coordinate the delivery of Mr. President's promises during the campaign. And that is all I know about that unit. Now, I want the role of that unit to be equally expanded to include what the states are doing, because the challenges we are having today are not from the skies. They are from the local governments of this country, which means the state is equally involved, because the local governments are within the states. So if we're able to even get KPIs for the state, then that will even assist Mr. President, so that the focus on federal government all the time will be reduced, and we can be able to say that this state is aligning their priorities and deliverables with what the government is doing or not. And then that unit is not even leveraging on our universities. These KPIs could be turned into research projects for students, both graduate and undergraduate. You have people that are doing MScs every day, PhD dissertations every day, and their report writing at the end of their graduation. Now, most of these researches usually produce innovative way of doing things, impact assessment, and so on and so forth, so that there is no linkages with our research institutions. So what is basically happening is that we do the research and they are left on the shelves of the university. Nobody is using them. So competence is something that you could get. Even most of the people that were sacked, they could get expertise from our universities. They could get expertise from our private sectors. But sometimes when people get into office, they get too comfortable because they believe that nothing will happen, and they will remain there, and they think they will remain there for 4 or 8 years. So it's not about the person, but the capacity to assemble people that can deliver.
Okay, Dr. Hamisu, let's leverage, this connection with you. I don't know if we'll be fortunate again to come back to you, but let's also quickly speak on Iman Suleiman's movement from police affairs to women affairs, and then let's also look at Bianca Ono. Quickly, please, if you may.
You see, Iman is somebody that I've worked with closely when she was essay to Minister of State Education. She's somebody that is a go-getter, and she started off as the head of National Commissioner for Refugees. And from there, Mr. President, that is under Buhari's administration. And the president came and felt that she has the capacity to be elevated to the minister, and then she was given the Minister of State Minister of Police Affairs. And Mr. President realizes that she could add value to the Ministry of Women Affairs. And he has done that. And this is the studious disposition that I'm talking about. Bianca, when she was, with respect to Ambassador Bianca, when she was in government as ambassador, there was no any scandal that was reported. She shows disposition to learning. She discharged her duties responsibly as a responsible citizen. So for me, bringing her back as a Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, as far as I'm concerned, it is based on her pedigree. So for me, I'm saying that pedigree should be part of it, but performance should be the overriding principle. So if she comes in tomorrow and she's not performing, nothing stops the president to say that, okay, she should go. Thank you for the little you've done for us. This is the point I'm making.
Very much, Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu. I'm back here in the studio. Perhaps Abdulaziz would be able to respond to some of the issues that have been raised. Of course, it boils down to how to get the best out of those that have been assembled for the task ahead. It's just 1 year gone, 3 years more to go. And in your opinion, in the thinking of Mr. President, is this team now ready to deliver?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And let me go back first to what I started with at the beginning of this program, the issue of rationalization and how the president carefully analyzed, with the help of the people who are, working with him in terms of assessment. When we came, there were all these decisions, like separating some of these ministries and placement of the ministers. And it is always good to, and I remember one thing that the president always says is that, he used to say it a few times, he had said it publicly even, that he is not, what he guarantees, he does not guarantee that he will not make mistakes, but what he guarantees is that if he is corrected, he will make amendments. And I think that is exactly what happened with this rationalization exercise. Like, for example, a lot of people, even at that time, criticized the rationale of putting ministers of state, for example, in Ministry of Youth, in Ministry of Police Affairs, in Ministry of Steel. But now the president had taken assessment of it, and he has perhaps discovered that he could have done it the other way around. And now all these ministries I have listed, he has relieved them of Minister of State. Because these are actually ministries that don't have much to do. So a lot of times, if you put two ministers there will be squabbles and disagreement and redundancy. Now, there were ministries that had one ministers each. Foreign Affairs, Trade and Investment, Ministry of Finance, among others, and Ministry of Works, these four, for example. And he also discovered that the ministers there, hard working as they are getting overwhelmed. And he has now, made them into two ministries. Each ministry now has, among these four, has a Minister of State.
No, I'm sorry, just to get clarification here. When you make a ministry, two-minister ministry, does the president tell them what the minister does and what the Minister of State does, or they work it out themselves?
Well, that's part of the responsibility of the policy coordination units that Hadiza Bala Osman is heading. They give each minister his own KPI, his own mandate. First, not before even the KPI is the work schedule. So each of the ministers has his own work schedules. And based on that work schedules, KPIs are also developed to now assess your progress. And that was actually what happened before this decision was arrived at. So it's the same thing. Now, the minister and the Minister of State have clear-cut mandate that you are responsible for this and that. The Minister of State is responsible for this and that. Of course, there is also coordination, because the convention, or I don't know that it is the law, is that the Minister of State, the minister is the one that presents memos from that ministry at the Federal Executive Council. And I think that is largely the difference. Until, except where the minister is not around and he directs the Minister of State to do so. Because, of course, there still should be leadership, because it's one ministry. So you can't have two independent ministers operating in the same ministry. So that's what happened. And the president now, make these changes. Remove ministers of state where they are not needed and put them where they are needed. So that is very important, a salient point in this whole exercise that I would want people to reflect on. And also in terms of generally managing efficiency, because this is what will actually drive efficiency. And the ministers also, as Dr. Hamisu has said, who was a bit more blunt, I feel it's not like we're trying to gloss over this or make a euphemism out of it, but it's the fact that people are not just sacked as a vote of no confidence, but also it is actually, as he said, an indicator to others that are remaining that if you don't sit up and perform well, tomorrow it could be you. Because as the president has said, this is an ongoing process. It's not something that is one-off. It is
all right, thank you.
Yes.
We've run out of time almost completely. Just your final remarks. Sometimes people would say if the Constitution says all states should have input in the Federal Executive Council, then some would argue, why is my state getting a Minister of State and why is the other one getting a Minister? So these are some issues.
On the bigger picture, really. Bigger picture of the system rather than individuals. Individuals sitting where and at every point in time. Because sometimes if you bring an angel into organizations, if the system is not appropriate for them, they are going to fail. And let's also, beyond that, it's also important for us to redefine our values, the kind of values we are subscribing to.
Indeed.
If we have right values, of course, the individuals coming in to further those values will further enhance and engender it, not worsening it.
We've run out of time. Mr. Okechukwu, in 30 seconds, please, your closing remarks.
My appeal to Mr. President is to empower the Women Affairs Department Ministry so that humanitarian will be of help to it. Secondly, the Livestock Ministry, because the livestock is a non-kinetic approach to security. Thirdly, the Balancement Unit should be strengthened to work with the EFCC and the ICPC. And Mr. President should relinquish the Petroleum Ministry so that it could also be supervised. As a Minister of Petroleum, I don't know how Bala will supervise the ministry to get the oil mafia. To get the oil mafia out of our chain.
Thank you very much.
Because the oil mafia is holding us here.
That's a fine place to leave this conversation. Mr. Osito Okechukwu, former Director General, Voice of Nigeria, we thank you very much, as always, for being on the program. Let me also thank Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies at the Bayes University. We thank you for your time and thoughts. And of course, Abdulaziz, Senior Special Assistant to the President, Print Media. We thank you very much for your time on the program.
Thank you.
And finally, but by no means the least, Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, political scientist and public affairs analyst. We thank you very much for your input into the conversation this morning. And that's been Good Morning Nigeria. We thank you very much for watching. We hope to see you again tomorrow for another incisive edition of the program. I am Victor Azu.
I'm Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. Bye-bye.